Hello everybody and welcome to another CB Show Tunes tutorial. Now today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be learning how to create this little rotation for our character. Now this is taking a third person character and we're making it into like a 2D game. We're also going to be covering how to of course hop and of course climb. Now if you guys have seen some of my previous tutorials and all, then you'll already know how to get these animations and movement systems all together. But I'm going to go and cover it anyway, just in case you're new to the channel. Also, if you would like to, please like, subscribe, and yeah, now we're going to get back to the video. Okay, so starting off, what we're going to need to do is, of course, get a player. Now, my player came off of Mixamo, as most of you guys know by now, and we have all these different animations for this character. Now, what you're going to need to do, of course, is get that character imported into your project and, of course, get them dragged onto the scene. So, like that. Once your character is on the scene, you're going to attach a rigid body onto it. If you don't know how to do that, simply press Add Component, type in rigid body, and there you go. You also want to add a capsule collider using the same method, and you're going to set the center at 1 and the height at 2. Make sure that you have your direction on y-axis, otherwise it's going to look like that or that, which, you know, it would be nice if you had a character like that, but we don't have that, so, you know. Okay, so the next thing that you're going to need to add onto your game object is an animator. Now, for those of you that don't know what an animator is, that's pretty much just allows you to control the animations on your character. Now to create that, simply go over to your project folder, right click, go over to create, and then select animator controller right here. Once you have that created, you're going to name it whatever you want to call it. I call this 2D anim. It's up to you what you want to call it. And here we have just a walk, idle, and climb animation. As before, if you don't know how to add these animations to there, simply click, drag, drop. So once you have the selected animations for your game, you'll of course just drop them in here like so. Now I created two different parameters for this, both booleans. One's called isIdle and one's called isClimbing. Now obviously isIdle means that if we're idle, then we're going to be idle, and if we're climbing, we're going to be climbing. Now what we do here is we're going to create triggers to go in between our animations, so basically like pathways or highways to our next destination. So to create that, simply select the animation that you want by right-clicking, select Make Transition, and then move it over to the transition that you want it to go to. Now, from idle to walk, we're going to set isIdle is equal to false, and make sure that you have has exit time off. Next, we're going to go from walk to idle, and of course, we're going to say if isIdle is equal to true, then has exit time is off. Now another thing is that if you don't see this condition here like it's empty and all, that's very easy to fix. Simply press the plus and it'll add a new condition as long as you have a parameter set up. Okay, so we're going to go and remove that condition. We don't need it. Okay, now we did the same thing with this setup on the triggers between climbing and walking, except we added an extra variable. So what we did is if isIdle is equal to false and isClimbing is equal to false. So basically we don't want to switch over to idle again or walking once we stop climbing immediately. We want to make sure that climbing is equal to false. The next thing that we want to do, of course, is go over to here, back to isIdle, and we're going to do the same thing except isIdle is going to be equal to true. That way we're not going to walking. And heading to climbing from walking, we're going to just say isClimbing is equal to true. And if you notice has exit times off, it's going to be on every single one of these animations. So same thing with idle to climbing, same identical setup. Okay, so we got our animation set up. I know that was very confusing for at least most people. But once you get the hang of it, it gets really easy. Okay, so the last thing that we added to our player is our script. Now I call this DP control. I was going to call it 2D player control, but when scripting, you cannot add a number on the front of something. Don't really know why, but you know, that's how it is. Okay, so I created this really, well, technically long script, but it's very simple to understand, and let's hop right in. So starting off, you're going to create some public floats called speed, jump height, and climb speed. These variables right here do exactly what they say. So speed allows us to move in a certain speed range. So say for instance we're moving at 1 mile per hour or 2 miles per hour. That sets that. Jump height decides how high we can hop. Now for most of you that have ever worked with jumping and all, we're going to be adding a new method called force mode, and we'll get into that once we get down there to the jumping code. Okay, and then climb speed is going to pretty much just tell us how fast we're climbing. And it's super easy to understand. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make 3 public booleans. One's called isRight, the next one's called isGrounded, and the last one's called isClimbing. Now these are set up just exactly like the previous ones. They tell you exactly what it's going to be doing. So the first bool tells us if the character is facing right. This allows us to switch and toggle between facing right and left instead of just immediately rotating whenever we hold down a button. isGrounded, it allows us to decide if we're on the ground or not, and isClimbing decides if we're climbing or not. Okay, so now we're going to need to find our animator. So what we're going to type is animator anim. And what this does is it goes over to the player and looks for the animator, which is right here. And we did the same thing with the rigid body. We call this rigid body RB, so our script will be able to search for our rigid body. Underneath void start now, we're going to plug in the values of our booleans. So isGrounded is equal to true, isRight is equal to true, and isClimbing is equal to false. Now if you set isRight is equal to false, then we'll be facing left immediately. But considering that most games start facing right, that's how we're going to be doing it. Okay, now we're going to be getting these components, or we're getting the animator and getting the rigid body. So you have to use these values to get these, I guess, components you can call them. And the reason for that is because it allows the script to start it out immediately before the game starts, right? So you don't have to call it every single time that you're running your game. Okay, underneath void update, this is going to be a brand new function. And what we're going to do is we're going to put var x is equal to input.getAxis horizontal multiplied by speed. This simply put is saying that we're going to create a variable called x, and it's going to be equal to an axis set called horizontal. This means that our left and right arrow key or A and D key. And then we're going to multiply that by our set value of speed. Now, if you notice right here, we have this little comment section called toggle turn. This allows us to toggle which direction we're facing and our movement to that direction. So here we put if isRight is equal to true. Then we're going to put transform.rotation is equal to quaternion.Euler, or Euler as some people call it. We're going to put 0 on the x, 90 on the y, and 0 on the z. Now if you don't know what a quaternion is, it basically takes the place of a rotation. I don't know why they decided to do that, but it is how it is, and we all got to deal with it. So just think of quaternions as extra transform rotation values. That's all it really stands for. Okay, so next thing we're going to put is else. So this is outside our if statement. We're going to say if isRight, then this is going to happen. Otherwise, transform.rotation is equal to quaternion.Euler, 0, negative 90, 0. So this right here allows us to face in the opposite direction. Simply put, we'll be toggling back and forth, is right, is left. Okay, so now comes the fun part. If we're grounded, so is grounded is equal to true, we're going to put this function here. So you see this comment, movement and animation, says exactly what it is. So if input.getAxis horizontal is greater than 0, is right is equal to true. So if we're moving at a positive of horizontal, which means we're going to be moving in the right direction, then is right is going to be equal to true. We're also going to say anim.setBool is idle is equal to false. That way, we're allowing our character to walk. Lastly, we're going to put transform.translate, and we're going to plug in our x value in the z location. Now the reason why this is inside the z location is because our rotation value on our quaternion turned our character to a -90. So our z value is actually facing forward or right now, which means we need to move on our z value instead of our x value. Okay, now we're going to put else if input.getAxis horizontal is less than 0. This means that if we're going to press the A key or the left key, then is right is equal to false, obviously because we're not going right. We're also going to set anim.setBool is idle is equal to false, and we're going to change the transform.translate to a -x on the z axis. This allows us to go backwards. And lastly, we're going to put else anim.setBool is idle is equal to true. So basically speaking, if we're not moving in any direction, we're going to be idle. Okay, now we're going to cover our jump function. So with our jump function, we're going to say if input.getKey keycode.space. So now we're being able to hop when we press the space key. And we're going to say RB, which stands for our rigid body, dot add force. This allows us to add a certain force to our character. And we're going to say vector3.up multiplied by jump height. This tells us how high we can hop on our vector3.up, or our y direction. We're going to put comma, and then we're going to put force mode. This is the one I was telling you guys about, dot impulse. Now, what impulse does is it allows us to be able to hop at a better rate than the original. So whenever you're using force modes, you have 4 different options when you're working with 3D. You have acceleration, which is over time, force, which is an initial force, but then decreases over time, impulse, which is continuous, and then velocity change, which I really have never used and I really have not found a use for. Okay, and then we're going to set is grounded is equal to false. This allows us to make sure that we're still grounded. Now keep in mind, all this time we have been inside this is grounded function right here. Okay, now outside of that is grounded function, we're going to put else. So this is going to happen if we're not grounded. We're going to say if input.getAxis horizontal is greater than 0. And we're going to do the same concept as we did above. The only difference is we're going to change is idle is equal to true on every single one of these. So greater than, less than, and nothing at all, we're going to set is idle is equal to true, and we're not going to mess with anything else. Now the reason why I did that is because I was looking at our animation, and when we were inside the air and I was pressing left or right, it looked really weird. So if you have it like a random jumping animation to where you're still inside the air, that's what you want to plug in right there, or that value. You want to plug it in right there. Okay. So once we close this up, we're going to hop outside of our update function and we're going to create a whole new void. And this void is going to be called void on collision enter. Then we're going to call collision col. Now what this does is we're going to go and collect the collision, and we're going to call that collision that we hit or entered col. Now we have real no purpose for this function at the moment, but once we get onto the trigger, then you'll see what that is for. So whenever we enter a collision, we're going to say is grounded is equal to true. So once we hit a collision and all, we're going to be on the ground. Okay, so as I said before, we're going to create a void on trigger stay, and we're going to call this collider that we hit other. Now, when we put this if statement, we're going to say if other dot compare tag. So we're grabbing the tag from this collider we just entered or stayed on. And we're going to call this tag climbing. So whatever object that you're going to be climbing on, you're going to put this tag on it. Next, we're going to say rb.useGravity is equal to false. That way we're no longer going to be falling down whenever we move upwards. We're also going to say is grounded is equal to false. That way we will not be able to hop while we're climbing. We're also going to say anim.setBool is climbing is equal to true. This allows us to start climbing and continually climb until we reach the top. Next, we're going to say if input.getAxis horizontal is greater than 0, then we're going to put transform.translate 0, climb speed, and 0. So this allows us to move upwards on our ladder. Now keep in mind that if you want to use like the W key or the S key, you can just simply change that to vertical instead of horizontal. And we just use the less than value on this to climb down with the negative climb speed. So yeah, it's a very simple script right there. Lastly, we're going to put void on trigger exit collider other. So what this does is it allows us to say once we exit the trigger, we're going to activate gravity again, so we're no longer going to be just statically in the air. And we're also going to set anim.setBool is climbing is equal to false. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look back at the game again, just so you guys can see how everything works. And if you have any questions regarding this game or the character, the jumping animation and whatnot, feel free to ask, leave it in the comment section below, and I'll be happy to answer those questions as well. Alright, if you like this video, please like it, subscribe, check out some of our other videos, and I'll see you guys next time.